Morning all. It was a brilliant weekend. I got to 3 out of the 4 events, and thanks again to Richard for doing all this. It's an amazing job he does. So, quite a lot of you asked whether there was a recording of this talk I put together sort of the day before, last minute stuff, and then I've added to because some of you sent me through some fantastic photographs. Shaggy, Peter Strassheim, Richard Olivier, etc. So I've added all those in at the end. They weren't part of the talk when I gave it initially. So I thought, well, let's see if I can't record it and just go back and, as it were, give it to myself again. I can't put in Hampshire's heckling from the back, sadly. But the spontaneity of it disappears a little bit. But nevertheless, here it is. And apologies for my cold. I think socializing you lot has given me a cold, so if I sneeze in the middle of it, forgiveness too. I also don't know how to get rid of this ugly face. I'd love to become invisible. At our age, we all become invisible. But it'd be great if I could do it here. Not sure I can get rid of the image. I'll try later. I thought I'd open with this cartoon from Jonathan Zapira, who's a good friend of mine. I'm a collector of his work, in fact. And he did this for his school reunion. He's 2 years behind us at Rondebosch, and I just think it's brilliant. It shows what we all look like. Grant sent this one through. It's a classic picture from the top of the founder's bell tower. Wonderful image. Taken back in our day, as you can see from the cars. Can you recognize whose car was who? I think Solly had an old Cortina. This was the crowd who taught us. Pick out your favorites or your least favorites. We'll go into them in more detail during the talk, but it's a fantastic group picture. The ones you don't recognize are prep school teachers and pre-prep teachers, I think. So there were 32 staff who taught us, and a remarkable 1/3 were Oxbridge. And you can go back and look at these at your leisure afterwards. But we have to start with Knob. I asked the gang whether anyone knew why it was called Knob. There were lots of sniggers, but I've often wondered what the real reason is. It's an odd nickname. Phallic, of course, but I wondered if there was another version. He had a terrible death. He died from the disease I spent my life being made miserable by, which is rectal cancer, operated on by my ex-partner before I joined the practice. And he had a rotten time, poor man. Vivian is still alive, says Richard King. He tried to get her to come to the drinks, but she was off in Hermanus, apparently, I think, he said with Nick, who's having some anniversary out there. So this is Myrtle. She was a kind person. She never taught me as such, but she was very nice. I always remember her. As a kind person, as I did Joe. He had the cruel nickname of One Lung, not because he had a lung removed, but I think he had TB. And what they used to do in those days was crush your phrenic nerve with a small operation and make that lung collapse. That was one of the theories behind it. If anyone can update my news as either correct or fake, let me know. But I do remember that those of us who didn't want to do cadets were offered alternative activities in what afternoon of the week it was, and he ran motor mechanics. And I remember him trying to explain a starter motor to some of us and inside his Hillman or whatever car he had. But these two people belong together. There was our recent tragic loss of Anthony, their son, but at least they predeceased him. And they belong together in this photograph. And then Boris, again, how did he get his nickname? J.R. Higgo. There's a side of him which looks a bit like Boris Karloff, the chap who played Frankenstein. Maybe that's where he got it from. He also died prematurely, didn't he? And then I asked the crowd whether they could recognize whose wedding day this was. And people got it. Some people got it right. It is indeed Chippy and Maggie. Lovely, lovely wedding picture which Paul Murray gave me, and I have to thank him for helping me. I dashed over the OD Union the day before our reunion, and he pulled out our magazines from the archives, and this is where most of this comes from, plus some extra stuff he gave me. But that's a wonderful picture of the Chippy we all knew, the bursar and vice principal. Wilkie, some of you may have been, well, in fact, I asked the crowd to put up their hands who arrived at the school in Standard 6, and there were a bunch of us, actually. I hadn't realised how many others. But I was one. We turned up in Standard 6. I think there were 24 of us spread across the houses, and Wilkie called us his lost boys, and he looked after us. He was a wonderful guy. I saw him later at those cottages he owned. And the thing I do remember about Wilkie is he had the most appalling bad breath when he came to help you in your classroom. But a very kind man, and we were the lost boys. And then Chunky, well, I think Chunky would be in jail these days, wouldn't he? In this world, he'd certainly be cancelled. But he was selected for the job, said Paul Murray, because he was a Royal Marine. The bishops needed Oxbridge, and it needed a Royal Marine to make us fit. And what's interesting about him is that he's not on that staff list. I went through it a few times, but he's not one of the 32. So he wasn't regarded as a teacher. He was sort of, well, I guess the class system. He was one down from the teachers, sort of above the domestics, but below the teachers. And then Major Bob. John Dobson was one of the speakers at the dinner, OD dinner, along with Nick Rabinowitz and Glenn Biederman Pam. It was a fantastic evening's entertainment from those three. And John Dobson was hysterical. Nick Rabinowitz absolutely ripped him off because he sort of stammers and mutters and swallows his words when he speaks, but he is really funny. And he was very funny about this guy. And he said, typical bishop, made in the art loft, 6 stories up and he only had one leg. And apparently he stood in a hand grenade, got his leg blown off, but saved the other guys in his platoon or wherever he was. He got lots of awards. And he had only one leg, which boys being boys cruelly nicknamed him Boot, because he only had one. Appy, Gerald Allenthwaite, God, he's just died this year, age 94 in Amanus. Lots of stories about him. Peter Mitchell, Sean Rosenberg, myself, Jumpy Galloway. Who else in that class? James Gardner, Shimmy Wilson, Gerald Sharp. That was Set 1 Latin. And he was quite a... Some call him, some people were saying he's quite a cruel teacher. He was very firm, very humorless, and very straight. And Peter Mitchell came up with this whole wonderful fantasy about him, in which he was named Flower. And we used to fantasize about him while waiting for the lessons to begin. He was delayed because he was sitting watching movies of just white light on grey walls while he cogitated and thought about and understood the meaning of life. Flower. I had him from Standard 3 at Wet Pups right the way through. Ian Pennington, nice man too. Curly Chris hair and Nigel Tebbit, of course, famously nicknamed Shaggy McLaughlin Fire Hazard because he went off to swim at the pool. Shaggy jumped in, came out, and his hair, being so curly, was absolutely dry. So Nigel, who was the master of nicknames, immediately called him Fire Hazard. And Pinnington also then got named Fire Hazard because he also had Chris hair. Shaggy now has gorgeous, lanky, silver fox locks. Very handsome is our Shaggy. I love this picture. I remember his wife. She was also charming. I don't know what's happened to them. These two also belong together, Brian de Kock, Mike Fisher. Mike Fisher was my patient. He died on my watch after surgery, one of the most terrible deaths I had to endure as a surgeon. He had just settled in for a year or three with Rowan Wilson's mother. It was a beautiful late romance, and then he died. It was awful, Crohn's disease. But these two men were my housemasters, and I have very warm and fond memories of founders with these men. Flash, you chaps in school had to endure Flash, followed by Dobbo. He got his chemistry degree from the University of Wales, I was interested to see. Fantastic athlete, I think, in his day. And the name Flash was brilliant for a guy who was a chemist doing chemistry experiments which exploded. Pickles, God. Didn't teach me, I don't think. And was he Greyhouse or Ogilvy? You guys would have known him. But I always associated him with cadets. He had this sort of slightly superior demeanour. But my abiding memory of him is as a rugby ref. I was playing in the C teams in those days, B's and C teams, and he used to ref us occasionally. And he had his pants pulled up to the waist and his jersey tucked in. Absolutely classic. That was Pickles. And then Dallas, I mean, there's just such a great photograph, isn't it? This comes from, who sent me this? It was Peter Strassheim. Fantastic picture. Oh my goodness, stories about Dallas LePage, my goodness. White House boys. I asked if everyone recognised who this was, and some got him, John Charlton. He didn't teach us, but he basically put Bishop's athletics on the map. The moment he took over, we just started wiping the triangular every year. He was an extraordinary coordinator. Even though he didn't coach athletics himself, he got all the good guys in and was a great coordinator. And one of my favourite teachers, Willie Slater. I just love this picture. He just looks like something out of an English novel, Bloomsbury. Lovely, lovely picture. And he's still going. This is off his website right now. Well, not off his website, it's off LinkedIn. I think I nicked these. I'm not on LinkedIn, but I stole the screenshots. He's still a maths tutor up in Botswana. And I'm sure many of you have fond memories, and hopefully not otherwise, of this lovely man. Roger James, called Roger because his initials were ROJ. I just remember an amazing, it's funny incident in the old chemistry lecture theatre, that banked one with the wooden benches. And Chippy was telling us, introducing Roger, who was standing next to him because he was about to tell us something. And Chippy stood there and said, "Now, Mr. is going, sorry, Mr. And he turned to Roger and he said, "Sorry, I've forgotten your name." To which Roger replied, "Mr. James." Chippy said, "Oh, Mr. James is going to tell you about the whole class was in cahoots." It was such a Chippy moment. And John Badminton, well, Shaggy and I in the audience probably have the fondest memories of him. A highly controversial figure. He and Mallet literally loathed each other. Went back to Oxford days, different colleges, I can't remember. But he eventually left the school under a cloud. I think he was moonlighting with some building company. But he died with severe Alzheimer's, I think I'm right in saying. Looked after by Barbara. He had cuckolded Barbara, his wonderful wife, Barbara Badminton. But I think on two sides of A4, the pluses of this man far outweigh the minuses. And that's a gorgeous picture, which, gosh, sorry, I should be able to attribute who sent these to me. Grant McLaughlin, I think, because it's a lovely one of the Fat Friar, Father Greg. And he was a complete character. He coached the Fighting Fourths. That was the cricket side, which John Campbell was steamed in as the fast bowler for. Great cricket team. And he used to eat in Founders along with Chunky. And of course, he used to drool into his beard. So he always had food in his beard. And Chunky sitting next to him was always appalled. Hey, Father, clean your fucking beard. Well, he wouldn't have said fucking in those days. But but that was the Fat Friar, lovely man. And yes, Tom Fair. Yeah, what a character. Water polo, pool. He was the water polo coach in those amateur days before we started getting Romanians and other pros to coach the school as they do now. Wow, how's that for a photograph? Trader. I mean, he just looks like an East End mobster, doesn't he? Again, nobody could tell me where his nickname came from. And this, I thought, from Spencer King was probably one of the nicest tributes you could pay to this man. They're witnessing the end of an era marked by qualities of steadfast loyalty, true, and compassionate discipline. So apparent in this dedicated pair. I'm not sure the word compassionate could apply to the discipline that Trader handed out. A relaxing retirement. Well, Charles Richardson, a couple of years ahead of us, and he's a friend of mine, told me he went to see Trader back in the 80s. Charles lives in England. And he was in Ipswich. He said he went down and he said it was quite shocking. He lived in the most modest house he had ever seen. And he went in for tea and he looked around and Charles said, I just thought, he was desperate to come back to England, but he just looked so lonely. Hardly looked like he had two brass whatsits to rub together. But Charles did temper all that by saying he could be completely wrong. Maybe he was incredibly happy. But that was the last I've heard of Trader. He was, of course, replaced by Strap, scrum half at False Bay, coached the second 11 cricket, rugby. He was a hard man, but underneath it all, there was a soft side. I got to know him later as a patient. He had a daughter who had a sarcoma over her shoulder when she was a schoolgirl or a young student, horrible tumour which required brutal surgery. And I was always fond of this man, who, in the standards of the time, was quite an enlightened liberal history teacher, by the standards of the time. That's a nice picture it's a staff picture. Brian de Kock, Tom, Mark Hanley, who was with us, died tragically. Odd Job, great picture. Only one of the new ones, I reckon, and Brian de Kock, the only one of the new ones, I reckon, he has full court. Nice man, too. And then these two lovable old rogues, not loved by everyone, of course. And Carolyn was with us on the evening. She came to join us. It was lovely to see her. It was much talk about the terrible treatment that the OD Union imposed on Tim Hamilton Smith back in the day. Jumbie Galloway, who's always been a great advocate of fairness in these sort of matters, says that the OD Union was terribly dark for a long time. I was a bit involved at the thing as well, but the modern OD Union seems much better. And then Dobbo, of course. Dobbo and my dad were altar boys at the St. Michael's 7:30 Mass on a Sunday. So, being Catholics, myself and the only Catholic Rosenberg in the world, Sean, and I would be picked up at 7:15 by my parents outside Founders, driven to St. Michael's, where we would sit there half asleep, and either my dad would walk up to be the altar boy, or Paul Dobson was there already. So I had Paul Dobson giving me a sip of wine at 7:30, along with Sean, in those days. But of course, endless tales about these two characters. And then a magazine which sometimes gave all sorts of events almost negligible coverage did do justice to this amazing event. An event certainly unique in the history of bishops, an evening of music composed by boys still at bishops, Grant McLaughlin. This was an extraordinary event. I remember it well. I was head of choir and we sang parts of it. And I love this line, the Telcata Cantata. The provenance of this title is swathed in mystery. And Grant didn't tell us where it came from. We must ask him. Words selected by James Self. James, of course, was in post-matric with Shaggy and Founders. Wonderful man, great friend, who's currently terribly, terribly, terribly ill, terminally ill, in fact, from what is commonly known as advanced Parkinson's. That's why he left the DA in a hurry. He said between Helen Ziller and this disease, he couldn't cope anymore. But it was a wonderful occasion and lovely to see the school giving it a great shout out. And also in the magazine, they'd have these 2 pages or a couple of pages of sort of artistic contributions every now and again. And I read them, this poem from Shimmy Wilson, which I thought was beautiful and found in the magazine. It's typical of that era, rich white people and a beggar. And Shimmy writes this from the perspective of the rich white person in his house, and the door knocks. Excuse me, sniffing, and it's called The Beggar. I'm going to read it to you like I did to them. Shimmy said to me afterwards, it brought a tear to his eye, which was lovely. The bell rang, and the dogs barked then. I rose into the room and followed into the hall. The door hung, inched open on the brick. The dogs sniffed at the rags kept steady by some chain that could only have hung from hell. The rags spoke, and I clutched the frigid handle in brass. The face was thin, upon a thinner neck, supporting hair half eaten away, and eyes that stared for hidden affluence. They found it too, in all I did and spoke. Hands extended, burnt in some flame or leprosy or poverty, and the mouth cracked and spoke. Money was the object, so as not to have to steal. The mouth cracked closed, a glib approval of a nation's plight. The richer feet then turned and tripped down, shuffled away. The chain clanked, dragged him down, and laughed as it held him there. Fantastic poem. Shimmy also wrote this incredible essay, which you can read for yourselves. Wonderful, the awareness and the pathos, and just Shimmy just understanding suffering, and wonderful, wonderful man. Shimmy. I love this. This also came from Peter Strassheim. Remember the Cretin? I think Julian Milk was sort of primary editor, I think. And then on to sport, and there's O'Brien grabbing the headlines with this absolutely brilliant action shot on tour in Natal. Fantastic. And what I loved about this, well, we loved this team because for the first time in decades they beat Rondebosch twice. But you've got to, I put this one up. You can see all the sort of gold on the tit of these guys. But it's Basil's report, which I've just got the little line at the bottom of. Sorry, my face is in the way of some of it. But you can't build the boys up too high. You have to take them down a bit. And that was a classic schoolboy thing in those days, school teacher thing in those days. This was the side that could have won all its game without too much trouble. Under pressure, when the pressure was on, it always rose to the occasion. But it was prone to regard some teams or some games as unimportant, and these it lost. When you look at their record, it actually wasn't that brilliant for a side which beat Rondebosch twice. But of course, I'm a hockey player. This was the Bishop's first 11. The school had always been hopeless at hockey. Piggy Lightfoot and Joe Lister coached it. But then Dave Lewis arrived, and he absolutely came in here and took hockey to the next level. We were given first team shirts that replicated the first team rugby. He brought in student OD coaches like Chris McEnroy and Keith Richardson, this was the touring team when we all went on this incredible school tour. A train full of teams all went to Natal, boys and girls, about 30 coaches long, just full of schoolboys. Fantastic tour. I put this up to show you that, again, this was remarkable. I'd forgotten all this, but the first 11, we lost 2 out of 24 games that season, including on the tour. The first 11 were joint winners with Rondebosch of the Interschools League. Well, Bishops had never even competed in that before. So we were joint with Rondebosch, but the record shows that we beat Rondebosch 3-2. So there we go, 1 up on them. And this was also funny, again, damning with faint praise, don't let the boys' heads get too big. So I read out the ones for the people who were at the drinks. Robin Bailey, a devastating right wing when he wanted to be. Scored the 3 most spectacular goals of the season, but at times casual and unenterprising. Passmore, Tom was there, a little slow for a right-hander, but compensated for this by hard work and laying on some very good passes. I got it to Baigrie, a bustling, very hard-working centre-forward, setting a fine example of giving us a full attention and effort to the game. While he scored some fine goals, he also missed some open ones. Yeah, Dave, but we were playing on grass in those days, muddy, the ball hopped over your stick. Blah, blah, Bob. Who else was there? Yes, Mark Lewis. Good stick work and a useful overhead pass. Hard working, but inclined to fluff hits under pressure. We got on to, who else was there? Rosie was there. Played some fine games in spite of an apparently casual approach at times. A little suspect in his own half under pressure, a circle under pressure. A very good Natal tour on and off the field. And we all asked Sean, who stayed mute, what he was up to off the field that so impressed Dave. Laurie Gardner, well, he was the hero. No negative things about Laurie. The foundation of our defence for 3 years now with especially good distribution. Encouraging and hard-working skipper both on and off the field. Laurie played SA schools. Wonderful hockey player. Bad knees these days, Laurie. And then there were various things that the magazine covered. Interhouse singing, remember those? I think 1974 was the first full interhouse singing competition. Grey House won it. Shimmy in Charge. They got the best unison song with 45 out of 50. I asked him if he remembered what they had sung. He couldn't. It was Lily the Pink. A drink, a drink, a drink, a drink to Lily the Pink, a pink, a pink. Fantastic. Surfing got some coverage. Rory had his Western Province colours acknowledged. I can't understand why John Mort, Nick de Kock and Dusty Dre didn't get them too. Poor Dusty, not well right now, I gather. Cricket. Well, cricket didn't do fantastically, as a team. There was I went through all the results. Bolus got 85 against Westerford. Gardner, Laurie got 50 against the ODs. But Brian Biebuck was a bit like Aidan Markham. He kept getting out in the 20s and 30s. And Brian, there you were, promising so much and then always getting out just when we needed you. Just like Aidan Markham. Cadets, hysterical. Cadets was, there were 4 platoons, so the magazine told me. And in the inter-platoon drill competition, platoon number 1 won it. Probably had old Pickles Curry judging it. And I asked the gang who they thought was who could remember who's the sergeant and who was the corporal in charge of platoon number 1. No one could remember, but of course it was Sergeant Henry van der Bale, who was with us that evening, and the corporal was Jeremy Ridge. Fantastic. Shooting, wilderness leadership. Yes, that was Mark van Ryneveld. He wrote a wonderful report about the wilderness leadership course. That was Ian Player's great thing up in the Tower Parksboard area. And he also pointed out that 2 other boys had done it, Anthony Harding and Bernard Kelly Patterson. A lovely report he wrote. Shooting was all about Sivertson and Anderson. And while most of you, like me, know nothing about shooting, it did record that this was the closest final ever on record. And in the start of the last round, there were 4 in contention, with 486, 485, 485, and 481 points. And at the end of the last round, Anderson won with 584, and Sivertson second with 583. Anderson hung on to that 1-point lead. Fantastic. Squash was all about Corder versus Gant. And I'll show you a slide about that just now. Cross country, cross country again. They put in the names of the top 25 in order. Taylor, of course, won it. I was always lagging behind him. I was second. Baron Metz. So these are cross country runners you've forgotten were good runners. Mark van Ryneveld, J.B. Gardner, Anthony Harding, Jumbie Galloway. Nigel Tebbit took me by surprise. Paul Baldwin, who's disappeared from all records anywhere. Bernard Kelly Patterson, Anthony St. John, and guess who came by in position number 25, who was at the drinks, and he didn't remember either. Well, we all gave him a big round of applause. Number 25 in the senior inter-house cross country was none other than Brett Gage of Schoolhouse. And then we're on to the next one. Something here, here we go. First thing he says that Derek Corder I didn't realise what a good squash player he was. He got the semi-final Western Province under 21s, amazing performance. But this was the first time this had ever happened, namely that Bishops beat the Staff. Corder beat Dave Lewis, Gant lost to Tim Hamilton Smith, Proudfoot beat, no one could think of him, Arthur Solomon. I can't imagine he played squash, but maybe he did, I don't know. Stevens lost to Ed Milne, I think that must be. And Bolus beat Melvin Wallace Brown. That must have been I think they were probably the number 5s. And 3-2. Bolus snuck it for the boys. Fantastic memories. Yeah, and back to cross country. These pictures are all taken by Shaggy. James looking really cool. Nigel Tebbit. Sean Rosenberg is always funny about Nigel. Wearing the tightest white pants ever. That was Nige. Pat Harper, he joined us in the evening. Lovely to see him. The late, great Richard Late. He's a great cross-country runner. He and I look a bit shattered down the bottom. But lovely pictures. Country. And there's a wonderful picture Mark sent me of him being pipped by Gavin Douglas Hamilton, who dived. And Mark said to him afterwards, well done. And Gavin said, I really regret it. I got a mouthful of grass and soil and bent my teeth. But he did pip Mark. And the key thing about this photograph, of course, is the photographer, the late, great Michael Duffett. He took this. He sold a copy to Douglas Hamilton for 25 rand, says Gavin. And then a week later came back and said, can I just borrow the photograph again? And Gavin never saw it again. Typical Michael. A fantastic photograph. One to remember that wonderful man by. And then there were the societies. I'd kind of forgotten the societies. So I ran through for the gang. It was quite fun. 10 Club, because remember the boys were all the secretaries. Vum Wilson, brilliant man. Historical Society, Michael Mornbrown. Literary Society, Michael Mornbrown. Democratist Society, didn't even know about them. Vum. Mountain Club, Galloway. Geographical Society, Jumbie Galloway. Photographic Society, no surprises, Mike Duffett. Debating, Richard Late. Agricultural Society, Mark Lewis. Had a pig farm out, he stayed there once or twice. Astronomical Society, Phil Vickers. Social Responsibility, didn't know we had one of those either, it was Mark Siebritz. Piscatorial Society, Mark Anderson. Sailing Club, Rupert Knight. Chess Club, well, they didn't have a proper write-up this lot, but they did point out that in the school chess champion that year, Johnny van Ryneveld pipped Chris Boys. And Chris was with us at this reunion, and new bows to Chris. Didn't know he was such a chess player. And then this one, the Debating Society, and this sign. Well, I have no recollection of ever debating at Bishop's, not the slightest one. But I get a shout out here. The society has not held a formal meeting since the last fall, but attended a forum debate at Sachs. Gathering formed part of a week of inter-schools forum debates, which culminated in a final contest at the end of the week involving each individual night's winners. So we must have done quite well. And we had a team, which didn't have late in it, surprisingly, but it had Baigrie, Liefeld, Sivertson, and Pulvermarker, Julian Pulvermarker, and Rory Sales. We performed competently, but were edged out by Sachs. And I have no recollection of that, but these societies were an important part of our lives, weren't they? And talking of memory, I've just come across this fantastic quote, which I'll share for you, by P.J. O'Rourke, a wonderful writer. He says, for a purely untrustworthy human organ, the memory is right up there with the penis. On we go. Yeah, and then we went on to, I think I just did all those things. Then we went to house news, the house reports. Remember we had one of these. This is the 4th term. Found us stuck up a boring picture. But Schoolhouse put this up. Again, completely forgotten this. Incredible performance by Schoolhouse. They put on the Mikado. And Shaggy played the piano at the front, and he took lots of pictures. So anyone wants lots of pictures of their heroic days in the cast of the Mikado, contact Shaggy. He says he's got lots. But this one, I think, shows Nigel, Lees, Richard Olivier, and Harry. But what a great thing they did, that lot. I'm trying to see if I've got anything about it. Any notes? No other notes about it. But well done, Schoolhouse. This was a nice thing. Harry Gant's adequate Nanki poo, damning with faint praise, and Richard Olivier's charming and humorous Coco, blah blah. Not far behind, excuse me, was a fine haughty Pooh-Bah from Nigel Lees. Never let his sense of character drop. Pooh-Bah was the gem of the evening, and provided a pleasant counterpoint to Katisha. Well done, Nigel. Fantastic. And then this was a play called Miniatures. Don't remember this one either. School play, Mark Lewis, Shimmy Wilson, Spencer King, Adam Brown, Phil Vickers, Mark van Ryneveld. They were all in it. And this picture was Pete Mitchell sent me. He said the back, James Gardner, and he says this is Tom Passmore. Oh, boy, it's the most unlikely looking Tom Passmore I've ever seen. But Pete was absolutely adamant. But, more culture. Fantastic. And of course, White House never won anything. Oh, except they won the rugby. Well done. And this is the famous year. Giles turned up to the reunion braai wearing his 1974 winners of the Inter-House Rugby Competition shirt. They were really proud. But it was a fantastic team, fantastic achievement. And it was their house report photograph, the final one of that year. And of course, J.B. Gardner, James Gardner, being sort of head of house and a formal sort of chap, as we all know, insisted that I post a proper photograph of the team. But in the middle, in the front, dear Mike van Bedar, who died recently, just too tragic. And that gets, as JB and Nigel and Tony Ling and Pete Mitchell have put together that wonderful revised John Denver song, Cape Town Roads, as opposed to Country Roads. And I think you've all been sent that by Richard. Fantastic effort, and all originally produced for Mike's memorial. These are the memories which make me go all tingly and my voice shake. Sorry. Ogilvy had the lion. Well done, Ogilvy. Greyhouse didn't have a picture, by the way, so I can't put that one up. But they did in their report note that Robin Impey, another tragic loss, he got house colours for rugby, and they won Lily the Pink. And Rory got Western Province surfing. That was in the Greyhouse report. And there are, I love this photograph. It's just a beautiful photograph. White House obviously got the lion off Ogilvy or whatever the order was that year. And this is Rob Ferrandy, who's stolen it for Founders. So we got it from Founders. And there it is, painted in Founders colours. Peter Strassheim had this picture. So it obviously did the rounds that year, did the lion. Great tradition in the school, isn't it? I wonder if it still goes. And then other things that got mentions in the school magazines, the War Requiem, Benjamin Britten's War Requiem. The choir sang in that, was absolutely fabulous. The staff played Chase Me Comrade. Can't remember the plot, but who can forget Dobson as the gardener, Alan Douglas as the policeman, who are the usual few attractive female prep teachers and staff wives. Willow Milne was always one of those. She was gorgeous. And of course, Brian de Kock holding the whole thing together, being a proper thespian. Son and Lumiere, of course, we were there. That our matric year was the 125th anniversary. The Son and Lumiere. I told them the story of the. There was going to be a concert, and there was a song going to be played. It was going to be my moment. I was to sing the solo of that beautiful Simon and Garfunkel song called America. Let us be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together, blah, blah, blah. And Dussie was part of the band, and we were rehearsing in the music school. It was crazily crowded. Brian de Kock was directing. Dussie had an electric guitar, and the lead fell out of the electric guitar, and I looked to my left. He was right next to me, and Dussie was being electrocuted on the floor right next to me, shaking with this thing touching his leg, this lead from the electric guitar, which was short. And remember in those days we all had stokies. The boarders all wore stokies, those slippers. And I stood on the lead. It fell off his leg, and he had to go to hospital. And we didn't get our moment of glory singing. The thing was cancelled. Inter-house singing competition, I mentioned that was Gray's big occasion. Matric dance, I asked for a few pictures. I didn't get them in time. I got another couple, I think, which I'll show you. And then there was prize giving. Yeah, this is the matric dance. This was my one, which I had from the matric dance of Sean Rosenberg and I. Fantastic. I got another great one, Yappie Berg. And his partner's Rene Vincent. Yappie said, for God's sake, Bob, take down that picture when I put it up. But in fact, Rene Vincent, How Lives Change. I don't know anything about her, whether she's related to the two Vincents. Bolus is, of course, a part of the Vincent family. And I thought we had another Vincent in White House, older than us. She's in Alice Springs and running a solar heating business with her fella. And I have to thank Richard Olivier for that little gem of knowledge. And then there are a whole lot of wonderful photographs which got sent to me afterwards, and I haven't included, and I'm just going to go through them for you. They're just wonderful pictures of boys, taken by the boys themselves, obviously. Mark Brown. It is Mark, isn't it? Yeah. And Rupert. Mark again. Rupert was a beautiful man. Absolutely beautiful photograph. He had a club foot and a pilot. Flew into the mountain. Tragic loss. And that's a classic boarding school dorm photo, isn't it? And you have to ask what the heck I'm looking at. It's a terrible photograph. Obviously, I'm totally impressed by Richard's family jewels. He must be naked under there. And anyone recognize the kind of sinister creature at the back? Several did. We worked it out. Bob Baigrie. JWG, John Walter Gant Campbell. Wonderful. Wonderful picture. Everyone remembered the story of his daily report card, which he had to do because he was always in academic trouble. And he was in Dobson's Latin class. And one day Dobson didn't write B plus or B minus. He just put U, full stop, S, full stop on the card. And Campbell picked his card up and he said, So, what's US? And Dobson didn't look up. He just said, unshaven. And Brian de Kock used to go crazy about this boy because we weren't shaving yet. We all had bum fluff, and John was shaving when he was about 12. Jumbie Galloway, lovely picture. He runs Namibia, it seemed to all of us. And I asked Seamus to explain this fantastic picture. This, I think, was making a movie. I seem to remember, one of those movies. Mike Fisher used to have a cine camera, which we made movies with. And this is Richard holding an umbrella, and Seamus in a sort of a flasher's grey coat with a packet of knickknacks on his head, and looks like, he's playing a panpipe or otherwise eating a knickknack. No idea. Fantastic photograph. Not just glorious, glorious, glorious. What someone once memorably said, the aching beauty of youth. A wonderful picture here, sent by Rob Morell, who was at prep with the Bishop's guys as at Wet Pups. And this is the whole crowd off on an outing from prep. And there's J.B. Gardner, Tom Parsifal, Mark van Reinfeldt, Laurie Gardner, Rob Campbell, and Chris and Rob Morell. And another boy at the back whose name I forget. Drinking a beer. Illegal. School uniform. Black label. Good choice. Wonderful. Ox on the charge. Mark Hampshire, who I think, along with Guy Murray, had the biggest boot ever seen by on a schoolboy. Incredible boot. SA Schools. I think they're playing Kingswood, as the next picture might show. Great picture of Bob in action. Here we are, another matric dance picture. Lovely. Harry. And he sent me this wonderful picture of Graham. What a terrible loss he was. As fresh as week. He had been in the army for a year. Came out and died tragically on, or what's that hill going up to UCT? So sad. This was sent to me by Mark Lewis. This is him and Edric Gorfinkel, another tragic loss. The long, the tall, and the short. I don't remember this player either. Sure, so much we missed or have just forgotten. Memory again. And this lovely picture of Mark. Sweet innocence, hey Mark. This one, the two kings. Who's that? No, it's James Gardner, I think, and Spencer King. Yeah. Look how tall Spencer was outside White House. Michael Morn Brown. Gosh, I didn't get any updates on him now. I know nothing about Michael. But he was our heroic first-team goalkeeper in hockey. And the Latin class, of course, English class, first in English, Latin. Lovely man. You can go through these all. These were sent to me again. Peter Strassheim's a source of extraordinary things. Those who got distinctions in matric, they're the matric results on the right if you want to go and peruse them yourself. And then Strass has kept a copy of every one of our last year's calendars. So there they are. First, second. Third term. Advent calendar. Never quite got the Latin, the biblical names. Never quite remembered those. But thanks, Strass. Fantastic. You can go through that and see what you would have been involved in. Yeah, and this was our program from the other night. I've just stuck that in. Wonderful program produced by Richard and Lee. This is the words to Cape Town Roads, Nigel on the back there, part of the recording. Wonderful words and beautiful recording. And so a final thanks to Richard. Put this up as my final slide of the presentation. Added in some of those others which I got afterwards. But this is Richard with Nob. And he had just been made a school prefect in the end of the first term. And where would we be without Richard organising us? Wonderful thing. And then I think I've got a few more Yes, I'll go back there. That's the end of the slideshow with the staff who you can look at your leisure. And just to finish with 2 slides from our reunion. There's a lovely one taken by Anne Parsmall. And of course, we have to ask ourselves, how many of us will be there at the next one? Well, Richard's brought it forward to 5 years' time, so there's a fighting chance we'll make it. But I think what we all commented about at the end of this reunion was how there was just a sense of caring and nurturing. Everyone's very concerned about the well-being of everybody. Many have retired or trying to retire, or hanging on to work. But the whole conversations was all about the well-being of each other, and that, as someone said, was very different to probably our 10th reunion, when everyone was competing about what great careers we all had. And such is the wonderful passage of time that as we get old, we remember the words of, I think it was Sir Joshua Wren speaking to so Joshua Reynolds talking to I get those 2 old boys mixed up, but the one said to the other, as one gets older, one must take care and keep in good trim our old friendships and keep making new ones, otherwise one will die a lonely old man. So lots of love to everybody. See you in a few years.